This is approximately where we may have left off. This should go up a little bit. Okay. Um, that's too far. That's how I was getting ready for next week. Okay. So these are those blue bumped structures that we're talking about, those nematocysts. So then these are the types of cells that we're talking about. So in case we tune in later, let's make sure that we're on the same page here. On these tentacles, these, you could say protrusions that are colored in black are those nematocysts. The triangles that you see sticking out have the cnidocytes inside of them that do the actual envenomation. And some of this is actually quite toxic because approximately across the world, they had mentioned that there's maybe 60 deaths to maybe jellyfish, which is actually quite high. But the number might even be higher. And you could say the same with shark attacks, that we might not know how many people may pass away to shark attacks. And it's kind of a tricky question on why we say, how's that possible? Why would we think that there's actually more people that die from this than what's actually reported? And what might happen is if you have someone swimming in open waters, they get stung by one of these or they get bit by a shark, they might not survive. So they're a statistic that just did not survive to add to that list. And that's rather unfortunate. And sometimes it might not be the envenomation that might have an effect on these people. It may be causing their nervous system to spasm and possibly start to cramp up in their muscles and then making it more difficult for them to swim. So unfortunately, they might drown then. Okay. So then, let's see here. We're past this, okay. This I think, okay, thank you. We're all caught up. We appreciate it. Okay, so this is where we begin then, correct? So this is what we're talking about, this neuromuscular system, this contraction that you correctly identified earlier. It's efficient for that animal, but that's what makes this such a landmark of evolution. It's because it's the first time that we actually see a type of nervous system. So why don't we talk about a nervous system in the phylum Porifera? Think about that for a moment. Okay, that's right, because they're sessile. They don't move, so there's no reason for them to have this neuromuscular system. Now, this is a trick question now. Okay? We're talking about peristaltic movements here. When we not visualize, but when we discuss peristaltic movements, that means that that's probably in an advanced structure like an intestine of some sort. But why would these animals not have a stomach? Yes. Intestines? Yes, somewhat. But these animals are still lacking something that would not allow this to be such an advanced digestive system, because what type of digestion would you presume is taking place in these animals? It's very similar to the peripherans. Exactly, because for higher orders of mammals like fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, that's extracellular digestion, which means this is actually taking place inside their bodies and then transported from one part to the other. Eventually, when you have your hamburger or hamburgers today, as your intestines are breaking that down, how do those nutrients like the carbohydrates from the bun, the protein from the hamburger, how does that get delivered to your cells? And that's what makes this somewhat of a trick question. We just have not spent enough time on any sort of anatomy for most of us here. But how, for humans, how would these nutrients get from the intestines to your cells that need those nutrients? How might that be possible? In other words, it's how anything gets from point A to point B throughout the body. It's not the nervous system. That might have a small amount to do with it. But how are things moved throughout? It's either through lymphatics, which is liquids, or what else when you see this? It's a specific type of muscle. Exactly. So the heart is contracting and it's pushing the blood through the system, which would include these intestines where you're absorbing these materials and then sending them throughout the rest of the body. Although these animals have this, it's still intracellular digestion. So it's just taking place in the localized area. That's not like extracellular digestion where it's circulated all throughout the body. Okay, I think that, okay, so that's where I just want to stop once we get down here, okay? So we could say that, okay, within the gastrovascular cavity, that's inside that velum that we're talking about, the GVC. Why would that maybe communicate with the tentacles? Now that's a tough question. I would admit that too. Okay, that's where it's going to start, but it's breaking down what? What do you suppose jellyfish prey upon? Yeah. If a type of fish swims into these tentacles, chances are that envenomation is going to stop that fish just like that. Okay? So then it's not that the tentacles are bringing that into their gastrovascular cavity. It would be, I would venture to think, a type of movement that, like let's say I'm trying to visualize this with a game that we used to play in PE. It was called Gator Ball, which meant it was a combination of soccer and football. But what happens is as you start the game, when the ball's on the floor, you got to be playing soccer. But if you can get that ball off the floor, like if someone kicks it and you catch it, then you throw it like a football. But let's say if the ball's rolling on the floor, you pinch it between your legs and then you jump at the same time like this, and that ball comes up, then you grab it, now you can play football. So something very similar must be taking place here, where those tentacles, it's not that the tentacles do the lifting, but as that contraction of that velum takes place, that momentum of lifting up with that fish in the tentacles pulls it closer to the mouth. And that's how that has to get into the GVC. Okay. Hopefully I didn't hurt myself here. I don't think so. That's what happens when you get older. Okay, so next week we'll start talking about continue with these body structures. I just wanted to briefly do this because you're probably going to see an example of a fish caught in the tentacles of these jellyfish. So we will catch up to you next time.